In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's 15th of July, year of our Lord 2026. Well, today we're going to be talking about surveillance, among other things. The wars continue, and Trump is escalating this, and I'm sure that Lindsey Graham is looking up from hell, smiling at the continuing war. But we also have a continuing war domestically, as we see the same federal law enforcement overreach tactics, forgetting about any kind of civil engagement in terms of enforcing law. And look, folks, that is vital. It doesn't matter whether they're doing the right thing or not if they do it the wrong way. That is the key thing. And as we have people pushing back against the flock cameras, we have a literal flock of cameras. The police are now going to aerial drone surveillance. Yeah, that kind of flock. And so it just keeps metastasizing. Even though there is some pushback in some areas, it's too little, and we have to step this up. We're going to talk about that, as well as the AI bubble economy. Gerald Celente is going to be joining us in the second hour. Stay with us. Well, we've had U.S. military strikes in Iran for the fourth straight day. And again, he starts with strikes just a couple of hours after he backs off of his proposal for a 20% toll on all cargo that would be passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Again, as Wall Street joked about this, Trump always chickens out, taco, and not a chance that Hormuz opens, nacho. And he just rang the taco bell again, didn't he? So it's almost funny, except that it's not funny. People are dying, and massive amounts of money are being created and added to the federal debt. Next week, it gets really bad, he said. Next week come the bridges, and we're going to knock out all their power plants. We're going to knock out all their bridges unless they get to the table and negotiate. But he just said he's not going to negotiate anymore. He said, I'm not interested in negotiating with these people. They're scum. Remember that? What is this guy about? The most dangerous thing we have is unpredictability. That is what gets us into very dangerous wars. And of course, this guy is absolutely unpredictable, whether you're talking about tariffs or whether you're talking about campaign promises. You can't count on anything that Donald Trump says. It's not the first time that Trump has threatened to strike power plants and bridges in Iran. He's frequently used aggressive, blustery threats as a negotiating tactic without following through. And everybody knows this. It's not fooling anybody anymore, as a matter of fact. And when you look at the whole idea of, we're going to change the regime. So we got people who want to rise up against the Ayatollahs. And certainly there are a lot of people who want to rise up against it. It's a horrible regime. Nevertheless, what Trump did was he drove the people into the arms of the Ayatollahs. You saw people circling the power plants and standing on the bridges the first time he threatened this. How many times is he going to threaten to wipe out their civilization, to wipe out their infrastructure? And this is also, by the way, not a justified war when you start to do that. Retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmett was on CNN. He said bridges and infrastructure that are primarily used to support military forces are legitimate military targets, which then implies that the ones that are not used by the military are not military targets. They are civilian targets, and it's not a legitimate target. This is why when Lindsey Graham kept saying, wow, we dropped nuclear bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and it was justified. No, it wasn't. Not on civilians, it's not justified. If you want to end the war early, then drop the nuclear bombs on these islands rather than doing another Iwo Jima. But that is not a justification. As a matter of fact, it's not the way to win a war either. And there have been, there's an excellent book that was written, Bombing to Win. And he pointed out the failure of American wars since World War II has been predicated really on this idea, this overestimation of air power. And the idea that if we drop enough bombs, we're going to win a war. Well, that didn't work in Korea. It didn't work in Vietnam. It It hasn't worked in any of these wars. And primarily it's because they don't even pick their targets to be military targets. They're picking civilian targets. What that does is that galvanizes the population against you. So we saw that happening with roads and bridges, them protecting it. Then we saw them mourning the leader that was assassinated. And so Trump's response to the people who were mourning the leader who was assassinated, of course, they put up signs and pictures, you're next and so forth. We are exceptional. We should be able to assassinate individuals and never have anybody even threaten to assassinate us. So he says, if they touch me, destroy the entire country. And they probably will. But they will destroy this country as well in terms of bankrupting us. House Republicans are going to meet with Hegseth at the Pentagon for a $350 billion request as an increase. It wasn't that long ago. Of course, I know that they've devalued the dollar significantly, but it wasn't that long ago before when the entire budget was $350 billion. Now they want that as an increase. And we just hit $1 trillion for the first time in this last budget, a record amount. Now we got to increase that by another 35%. And that's not really even where they want to go. That's not even including where they want to be in terms of the standard budget. Trump and War Pete want a $1.5 trillion budget. They started talking about that immediately after they got their record $1 trillion budget. They wanted to go to $1.5 trillion. I think that we just can't throw fiat money at wars and win them. This is something that is a clear indication of a late stage empire. The debt, the paranoia, the constant wars, and this is exactly what is happening here. This is a dying empire, and the emperor has no clothes, and he has no means to pay back this crushing debt that he is putting on this country. The empire in its dying throes. They're expected to combine a funding boost for the Pentagon with a grant program to encourage states to adopt voter ID. More money thrown out. And that is the way that both Republicans and Democrats have operated. They bribe state and local governments by grants and money. And so they bribe them, they blackmail them, say, all that money that you're getting from us, we're going to take that away now, unless you do this. And so I think we ought to have voter ID. I don't think we ought to have bribery from the federal government. I don't think the federal government ought to be setting the rules for elections. I think that is a violation of state sovereignty. But of course, that's what happened with the fourth turning after the Revolution, with Lincoln's War. They decided that they would break the power of the states that had created the federal government. And so you had things like the change of the appointment of senators to make them directly elected. The Constitution amended for that, and many other things. And those are now escalating. We're now seeing the Democrat socialists, and they've got a new platform out there. They want to get rid of the Senate entirely. They want to have one legislative body, Congress, which is going to be the entire government. Get rid of the judicial branch, get rid of the executive branch, get rid of the Senate. Actually, they would keep the executive and judicial branches, but they would be subordinate to the Congress, or should we call it the Politburo? Because that's exactly what their model is. Their model is the Soviet Union. That's where the Democrats are now. As I said for the longest time, if you listen to this program, you heard me say, the Democrats of today are the Marxists of my youth. And the Republicans are the Democrats of my youth. They are the socialists of my youth because they have accepted as a given the whole idea of the welfare state and all the rest of the tenets, the taxpayer-supported government schools and all the rest of this that were part of the planks of the Communist Party. They've accepted all that. And understand that the difference between socialism and Marxism, as the Reason parody pointed out the other day that we played for you, the only difference between the two of them is that socialism polls better than communism. But you heard the president talk about how much he wants to effectively double the funding for the national defense, said Mike Johnson. So it's not just they want to go from a record $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. That'd be a 50% increase. No, they want to go to $2 trillion. That's what they've got their mark on. This is the rapid acceleration of debt. Folks, we're going to go into hyperinflation with this kind of stuff. They can't sustain this. It's not sustainable. It's such a fraud. He says, and look, It's because we live in dangerous times, said Mike Johnson. We're fighting evil terrorists and tyrants around the world, and we have to be able to protect our national security. Yeah, well, we live in dangerous times because we are starting wars, because we're attacking civilian populations, and because we're acting like literal pirates, as Trump has said. He said, yeah, we're kind of acting like pirates. And yeah, you are. I called you a pirate before you called yourself a pirate. And when you talk about national security, folks, we have to be able to protect our national security. Do you notice that he didn't say we have to be able to protect the American people? That is not what Mike Johnson is interested in. He doesn't care a fig about you or your family. This is just like the American government has been. Once they created the national security state and all the rest of this after World War II with Truman, he created the NSA with an executive order. He started pushing all this national security state, the idea that we're going to operate as the world's policeman. Once we went to all of that, started talking about national security this and national security that, it really was the plan to save themselves and let the rest of us die. That is really what they mean by national security. Protect the politicians, protect the bureaucrats, keep a continuity of government, and the rest of us can burn, literally, when they start a nuclear war. This is what it has always been about my entire life, and it's exactly what it's about. So you will be forced into tax, slavery, and debt to pay for this empire, to pay for the military-industrial complex products that they want to sell, so that they can pursue their geopolitical games. And if they don't blow us up, they will push us into poverty. Senator Tim Kaine and the Democrats are pushing back on this now because they're out of power, but they have no problem pushing for debt and pushing for a bigger military. He says, we're looking at not only this supplemental, but the fact that Trump is trying to get a $1.5 trillion defense budget. Well, you may want to talk to Mike Johnson, because Mike Johnson is saying, no, we got to get to $2 trillion. We got to double where it is right now. And so he said, this is a supplemental that is supplemental on top of the presidential budget request that increases the Pentagon's budget by 40% in just 1 year. Actually, it's 50% if we're talking about the same thing. Well, meanwhile, the U.S. wants to tear down the International Criminal Court. And look, I'm not a proponent of the UN, and this is an excellent article from the New American attacking the agenda of the UN, attacking the agenda and the honesty and the integrity of the International Criminal Court. And we need to always consider that. But think about how many things that we do with the UN. I mean, we're still giving money to the UN. We're still members of the UN. I think we should get out of the UN. So I do not support any of this stuff. However, why now? And why only the ICC? Did they have a problem with the climate change stuff and the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change and all the rest of this stuff? No, they don't have a problem with that. Do they have a problem with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child to destroy parental rights and to make children have rights so they can be the advocate for the children and they can take the children away from the parents so a village can raise a child? They have a problem with that? No. Do we understand that the drug war is actually from the UN? The schedule of the 4 different levels, the 4 tiers of drugs that they prohibited, and which drugs go into those 4 tiers. That all came from the UN. That was a UN agenda. And it was the UN that jumped out and said, hey, you can't legalize this even for medical use. You can't legalize marijuana. When that happened, and I thought, what is the UN doing complaining about that? And that's when I realized that they had actually created the war on drugs, not Richard Nixon. He just turned in his homework and did it for them. So we have all these problems with the UN. Why are we focusing then on the International Criminal Court?
250 years, Americans have governed ourselves as a free and sovereign people.
Really?
We choose our own leaders, we determine our own laws, and when we're accused of a crime, we stand for judgment before a jury of our own peers. This is the essential and indispensable feature of our form of government. It is the foundation of our shared way of life. But today, powerful people in faraway places want to take that away from us. They believe that they should be in charge of your laws, of your country, your life, and they don't care whether or not you agree.
So does he say that about Israel? When Israel says we're going to purge anybody that criticizes us, you will be banned, as they did with that one UN individual who talked about genocide. They said, well, they boasted about it. We got her banned. She can't even come in the United States. And we even got her husband demoted at his job. She can't use the banking system. We'll show you that we control everything. Don't criticize us. We'll not only call you racist, but we will ban you from travel. We will ban you from the banking system and all the rest of the stuff. Don't talk to me, Rubio, about that. You were the one who said that we went to this Iran war because Israel forced us. So now they're talking about getting rid of the ICC, the International Criminal Court. Why might that be? Well, let's just consider the fact that the controlling interests of our government, the people that Rubio and the rest of this crowd has sold out to, these Zionists who want to destroy free speech and who want to ban people that disagree with them politically, disagree with this foreign government, this foreign government of Netanyahu and Gallant and other people who have admitted that they not only want to wipe out everybody in Gaza when they call them Amalek, that's what they're talking about. That is basically code for genocide. Because if you remember, they're referring back to the Old Testament where the Amalekites were to be eliminated. And of course, go back and think about how their first interaction began with the Amaleks. Amalek was that they took their name from. He was a descendant of Esau, the twin brother of Jacob, who became Israel. And it was the Amaleks who attacked Israel when they got close. I mean, there wasn't any conflict there. They were the ones who initiated it. Folks, we're back to who started the war. What is justified? Is it justified to act as an aggressor? And so because of that, there was bad blood between them forever. And they both tried to wipe each other out. And so when they talk about the Amalekites, and they call some nation Amalek, they're talking about wiping them out. And again, it goes to the story of Esther and Purim that they celebrate on an annual basis. He talked about genocide. And when you look at Gallant killed his own people in order to get some of the people in Gaza. And as John Kiriakou pointed out, this is the ethics of Israel, that if there's somebody in an apartment complex that they want to get, that's a leader of some group that they want to wipe out, they'll kill everybody in the block in order to try to kill that one person, and they'll do it without remorse. And they did it to their own citizens on October the 7th. Just massive amount of destruction. I just played for you this week the video of all the melted cars on the road, and of course, the people who came over the walls on October the 7th didn't have the kind of weaponry to do that. The Israelis did. But Gallant has even admitted that they would sacrifice. Yeah, in this building alone, we had 18 Israelis that we had to kill to try to get these terrorists or so forth. And so they're war criminals, they're genocidal, and that is what the ICC is really focused on. That's its mission statement. Now, the New American points out that like everything else in the UN, you can't really trust them to be honest brokers, but they do focus on war crimes and on genocide. And so because we are allied, and I would argue controlled by Israel at this point, something's got to be done to protect Benjamin Netanyahu and Gallant and these other people and the Americans who've been complicit with him. But we've got our own issues as well. If you just look at Venezuela, what was done in Venezuela to these so-called drug boats that we never bothered to check to see if they really were running drugs. And if they were, that has never been a capital offense under our law. And it is not something that they have a legal right or a moral right to execute people without even verifying that they're running drugs. But again, it's not a capital offense. But they just started blowing boats up. And the worst case was the very first one, where they shot the ship up and people were still surviving in the water, and they circled back and executed the people who were shipwrecked. That is a crime under every rule book. It's a crime under the Pentagon's rule books. It's a crime under the Geneva Convention. It is a heinous act. And so people like Trump, Rubio, Hegseth, and other officials in the U.S. government have an exposure to having somebody come after them for war crimes and genocides. And how does that look? You had that kind of indictment against Henry Kissinger for a very long time. He always dodged being arrested. Nevertheless, in the Philippines, Robert Duterte, who Trump loved when Duterte was the president of the Philippines. I think that's the title, not prime minister. I think it was president. And he had his people who were fighting the war on drugs. He told them, just do extrajudicial killings. You suspect somebody's a drug dealer? Kill him. Well, after he was out of power, the Philippine government handed him over to the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and he is there awaiting trial for war crimes and other high crimes. So there is a justification for that. And this is something that, quite frankly, with the enemies and the way that the Trump regime is attacking everyone, this is something that could be the way for the future for some of these Trump administration officials. And so it's for their own interest as well as for the interest of the Israelis that they want to go after this. But they're not going to cut the ties to the UN. See, they don't mind all the rest of this stuff. And to me, that is the dog that did not bark. The fact they don't have a problem with all the rest of the things that the UN is doing. And it's pretty much everything that it does. But if you've got a court that is going to call out people for war crimes and for genocide, we got to get rid of that. They issued some prosecutions, says the New American. However, the U.S. military looked into incidents at facilities in Afghanistan after they tried to charge people with war crimes in Afghanistan. Some lower-level soldiers did face court-martial, and a handful were convicted on various charges. Do you think that would have happened if the ICC had not pushed against that? And, of course, they certainly aren't perfect. But, of course, neither are the American courts either. And when you look at the investigation about war crimes in Afghanistan, think about the fact that they never talked about prosecuting Gina Haspel. She was the one who presided over the torture that produced lies about weapons of mass destruction. She covered up the torture program. And of course, John Kiriakou was a whistleblower. He went to jail. Nobody else went to jail. The people who did the torture didn't go to jail. The psychologists who got paid massive amounts of money to train the CIA on how to torture people, they didn't go to jail. And as for Gina Haspel, even though Trump, when he was running, said the Iraq war was based on lies about weapons of mass destruction, he said they were just outright lies. He promoted the woman who produced those lies using torture. He promoted her to the head of the CIA. Yeah, and they did not come after her with the ICC either. According to Rubio, the Afghanistan investigation was only the opening move in an assault against American self-government. Well, if you're going to have self-government, you need to have some justice. So it's on you if you don't hold people responsible when they commit war crimes. If instead you promote them to the head of the CIA or other issues, then that is where these people actually serve a useful purpose. They don't have the power to come into America and arrest anybody. But if you want to do business internationally, if you're traveling around, you've got a possibility that you might get arrested and taken to their court. And I say more power to them. There's credible evidence, says the New American, to support the ICC's investigation into alleged war crimes committed by U.S. soldiers and CIA operators. Accusations of war crimes leveled against Netanyahu and Putin may also be aligned with objective principles of justice, but the ICC has traditionally been biased and unjust. Tell me any court that is not biased and unjust. I don't know of a single one. Its prosecutions overwhelmingly target leaders from nations that resist globalist influence, most notably in Africa. Nearly every major prosecution the ICC has undertaken involves African leaders. This, to me, is an echo of what we see in terms of people saying, well, the American justice system is skewed because it focuses more on blacks committing crimes than on other groups statistically or whatever. And we've talked about this in the past. It's a higher percentage of blacks, but there's actually more whites than blacks who get caught up in the legal system. So we can argue about the demographics of all this stuff. But let me just say this. You know, many people say, well, are they actually committing the crimes? If the crimes are more relevant in a black community, then, of course, you should have more black people arrested if that is something that is endemic to the community. Just like we see the gang rapes endemic to the Muslim Pakistani community in the UK. What do you think about the African nations? I know that the African nations are some of the most corrupt governments we've ever seen. They're mostly Marxist, and they're horrific. What they do to their own people is horrific. I'm not surprised at all that there's more prosecutions of African nations. You can try to make a sinister motive out of all this, but I think it is more than likely justified. So he goes on to say, we will dismantle the ICC brick by brick if necessary. And I would say it's because, just like Kissinger before them, they deserve to be labeled war criminals, and they deserve to be subject to arrest when they're traveling, and they may be subject to sanctions and other issues as well. And I think it would be justified to do that. As a matter of fact, when we look at all this, the real issue before us is, did Israel bring us into this latest war where they are actually still committing genocide and war crimes in Lebanon? And they drug us into this, and now they want to merge with the Israelis. And it's this administration that's trying to get rid of the International Criminal Court because they're international criminals themselves.
We are Americans. We are a sovereign nation. We don't take military orders from Israel. Resist like it's 1776. Tell your senators to oppose NDAA Section 219, U.S.-Israel Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative. Call your senators, 202-224-3121.
Yeah, folks, this is the fight we can win. There's not that much support for it in Congress. And if you call and put pressure on them, look, I've seen this before. I've mentioned this case before as well. In North Carolina, as homeschoolers, we were a targeted minority, very small minority back in the late 80s. And the Democrats were in control of all the government. They had the governorship as well as both houses of the state house, the state Congress. And so they had the teachers union, big, powerful, and connected to the Democrat Party. They wanted to eliminate homeschooling entirely. And what happened was this small active minority of homeschooling parents started calling their representatives. And even in a Democrat-controlled state that was beholden to the teachers union, we stopped these rules that would have shut down homeschooling. You can do that. So few people ever call, but when you do call, and if you call en masse as a group, even if you're a small group, the perception is that there's overwhelming move against this, and they back off. And we can get this to back off as well. I am absolutely certain we can. Make sure that you call, and make sure that you call the Senate. It's before the Senate right now. And that number that you just saw up there, I don't have it to repeat it, but it's very, very important. We'll post that on our social media account today. Meanwhile, the Democrats are going full communist. And their plan, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, is to abolish the Senate and to create a Politburo form of government. They will have the Congress appoint the president and will control the judiciary. And they have many other things down their wish list. They want amnesty for all illegal aliens and, of course, wiping out any student debt and all the rest of this. We'll talk about this when we come back. We're going to take a break. We're at the bottom of the hour here, and we will be right back, folks. Stay with us.
But unlike most revolutions where the people rise against a real economic oppression, in our case here in Boston, we are fighting for purely an abstract principle.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
It is, however, not nearly so abstract as the young gentleman supposes. The issue involved here is one of monopoly. Today, the British government will monopolize the sale of tea in our country. Tomorrow, it will be something else.
liberty. It's your move. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Wait a minute. Where am I?
Sorry, Jefferson. The scoundrels who put America on central bank fiat currency used our heads on their coins as some sort of trophy. Despicable.
This is outrageous. Washington. I spent my life fighting centralized power. Now the Federal Reserve monopoly parades us around on their monopoly money. Tell me there's some good news to all this.
Well, there is a coin they can't control. One that isn't backed by the Fed, but backed by the Fed Up. The all-new David Knight Show commemorative coin. Now patriots can support a show that won't sell out with a limited edition coin that's sure to sell out quickly.
They say money talks, and this coin has something worth listening to. The truth doesn't need inflation, only support.
And speaking of support, I want to thank the people who have voluntarily supported the program. And these are the people who have sent support in the mail. Currently, the gas gauge is at 3/8. And I want to thank you all for this, especially Matthew H., Lois L., Gary B., Jack and Veronica, and Martin K., and a supporter in Cincinnati, Ohio. Karen cannot find the name. And HD in North Carolina. And Fletcher from Louisiana, also known as Heavy Eagle. Thank you so much. James F. and Timothy W. Thank you so much for your support. And if you would like to find where the program is broadcast live, as well as where you can find the archives of the program, we have the links for both video and audio at davidknight.news. We also have our gas gauge, so you can see how the program is doing in terms of financial support. And you can find links to where you can support us. We have a P.O. Box. We have Cash App, we have Zelle, and so we also have Subscribestar, and we appreciate the people who support us there on a regular basis, and we just had a few people who have signed up recently for that this month as well. Let's get back to the DSA. According to a source familiar with the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, the organization plans to roll out an update next week to its long-term vision for the U.S. policy platform. And folks, this is a good example of why the Democrats, the elected Democrats, are pushing the panic button. This is so far out of the mainstream and so radical. They know that this is going to harm them as much, if not more so, than the tranny stuff that is out there. So they want to eliminate the Senate, replace the president and the Supreme Court with an executive branch and judiciary that is chosen and subordinate to Congress, would enable a one-chamber Congress, no Senate, to appoint a president and judges who are rubber stamps for its agenda. And just think about it. Why did we have two different legislative branches? I always used to wonder about that when I was a kid. I didn't realize that the Senate was there to represent the power of the states. States don't have rights, by the way, but they do have powers. And they retained those powers unless they are specifically delegated to the federal government. That's what the 10th Amendment says. And so to break that, you had in the early part of the 20th century, you had people who had been in the Grand Army of the Republic during the Civil War. And the Civil War was all about breaking the power of the states. And folks, that is essential because you have to have that division of power between the people and between the states and between the federal government. Otherwise, all power is going to be consolidated. And this is exactly what these people are trying to do, is consolidate all power into one spot. Now, Madison addressed that. He said, and this is a quote that was put in with the New American article talking about this. Madison said, the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elected, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. And that is exactly what they want to do. Put all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the hands of Congress, in the hands of a Politburo. It is the Soviet model. It is antithetical to the Constitution. But of course, this all began, we had the constitutional amendment that had the direct election of senators, and people cheered that and said, hey, democracy. No, people already had representation in the House of Representatives. That was what that was about. They wanted to divide the federal government into competing powers. checks and balances. And they wanted to divide the power of government between the federal government, between the states and the people. And what they did was they broke the power of the states. That was the veterans of the Grand Army of the Republic who were under Lincoln. And I think it's kind of interesting. You back and look at Lincoln. There was a alternative history book, which I thought was excellent, by Harry Turtledove. It's called How Few Remain. And what he does in it is he has there's so many things that happened in the Civil War that the history is so amazing and interesting, just in terms of what happened in the battles and little issues like that. At one point, before I think it was Antietam, some orders are dropped, and they don't realize it. And the Union Army gets those orders, and it changes the battle. And it's still a very bloody battle, but it would have been a very bloody loss. And according to his alternative history, would have ended the war early. So you still have all these people, many of them who died during the war, right after, like Lincoln, survive. And Lincoln, because he lost the war, is drummed out of public life, but he makes a comeback at the point where this book begins. And he comes back as a leader of the Socialist Party, because that's what you wind up with when you consolidate all power. And I thought that was spot on in terms of, when we look at his rhetoric, it does really line up with the socialists as well. A single chamber, quote unquote, Congress, by definition, a one-party body that will rubber stamp policies of the party. And the model for this is the Soviet Union. The USSR's Politburo, the political bureau. Understand that, in a sense, we almost have that in terms of what the Congress has done. The Congress, everybody talks about a do-nothing Congress. And they point out here, they said, well, gridlock can be a good thing many times. And I agree, it can be. We don't necessarily want to accelerate change. But understand that the Congress really does do nothing. They have abdicated their authority to the bureaucracy. So we really do have a political bureaucracy. You want to call it a Politburo? Go ahead. I'm fine with that. The updated platform would include amnesty for all immigrants. It would defund the Department of War. It would extend full voting rights to people with criminal convictions and people who were not citizens. It also advocates establishing a 32-hour work week with no reduction in pay or benefits, Medicare for all, canceling all student loan debt, the elimination of cash bail, and universal rent control. You can see why this has got politicians in the Democrat Party who want to keep their position running scared, trying to distance themselves from it. It is full-on Marxism. Even as the GOP is accepting the welfare state and government schools and all these other aspects of socialism, they're going on to full-on Marxism. Again, Cliff Connolly, the DSA's Marxist Unity Group caucus, said, we're never going to have democracy or socialism in the United States as long as the president and the Supreme Court exist in their current form. The whole point of having a Supreme Court, the president and the Supreme Court, is so that if popular legislation passes through the House of Representatives, the ruling class has these other levers they can pull to stop it from happening, he said. And so he pointed to the blocking of Biden's student debt relief as an example of this dynamic. They always see everything in terms of the class struggle, in terms of different classes, levels of people. But we have to understand that it was really about using the fallen nature. This is what the Christian understanding at the time of our founding was about. They understand that man is fallen, that we have an evil sin nature. So how do we control that? As Madison said, because men are not angels, we need to have government. But because the government will be run by men, how do we control that? Well, the answer was divide the power. Set these people who are ambitious against each other in terms of checks and in terms of balances. That is the essential issue. It's not about a class struggle, which the Marxists always see, or as they've tried to cast this most recently, as a struggle of racism. But let me just say that as the Democrats are running to this model of centralized authority, is it a good thing for us to have all power centralized into the executive branch? Look at what Trump has done in terms of executive orders. He does executive orders constantly declares an emergency, does an executive order, and then does things that are antithetical to the Constitution, as opposite to the Constitution, things that are prohibited in the Constitution. He just does them by fiat and by executive order. So there is a danger, an equal danger, coming from the Republican Party that we see from the Democrat Party as well. They are both drunk with power. And unfortunately, what has happened is we have lost most of the checks and balances at this point, and nobody is holding anyone accountable. Just like we were talking about before. Whether you're talking about war crimes or genocide, nobody is held accountable. It doesn't matter how many people they kill. They could lock us down in a medical martial law. They could then inject people with what they knew was a poison, a genetic code injection. I called it the GCI in 2020, and I've been calling it that ever since. They can do all of that, and there is no justice for them. Yeah, we know what happens when we consolidate all power.
I want to talk to the Trump supporters for a minute. I don't know who you are, and I don't know why you like this guy.
Whatever he does, he accuses everyone else of doing. The man cannot tell the truth, but he combines it with being a narcissist. A narcissist at a level I don't think this country's ever seen.
Ted Cruz.
And my concern is that he would grab up that power and really treat the country as sort of his little bully fiefdom.
Donald Trump is everything I taught my children not to do in kindergarten.
He's been exploiting working Americans for 40 years.
He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot.
He says he's for the little guy, but he's actually built a lot of his businesses on the backs of the little guy.
Kellyanne Conway. Yeah. She knows what he's about.
Donald Trump the other day said that, quote, if he tells a soldier to commit a war crime, the soldier will just go do it.
And they're doing it right now. That's Mike Pompeo.
I don't think Donald Trump has even read the Constitution, knows what's in the Constitution.
Yeah, Glenn Beck likes him now.
A toxic mix of demagoguery and mean-spiritedness and nonsense.
Yeah, Rick Perry took a position.
I just cannot support Donald Trump.
Susan Collins.
Donald Trump is a delusional narcissist and an orange-faced windbag.
Donald Trump is a con artist.
He doesn't know the difference between truth and lies. He lies practically every word that comes out of his mouth.
I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office.
Yeah, they all knew then. They all know now. We all know now. We also know what Lindsey Graham is really about. Now, Trump has demanded basically that Lindsey's sister replace him in his Senate seat until they have the elections. And so that happened because Trump gets what Trump wants. As Kentucky Statesman put out on X, he said, no experience necessary. The only job requirement in the U.S. Senate is the ability to follow orders from AIPAC. That's absolutely right. You know, I've talked about the wars that Lindsey Graham has done through his entire life. I mean, he lied us into one war after the other. To his dying day, he was pushing war, and he was talking about how this is great. Look at, we spent all that money in Ukraine, but look at how many Russians we got to kill. I mean, it was all about bloodshed and money. That's what it was about. But of course, Ben Shapiro loved that.
We can judge a man by his enemies.
Yeah.
You know who was happy when Lindsey Graham died? Iran was very happy. Russia was very happy. You know who else was really, really happy? The echo chamber of evil. So who is that echo chamber
that's me.
of evil? Well, the dirtbag left and the two online right. They hug each other. They help each other. They maximize each other. They collab on destroying America. So what you have here is a closed loop, an echo chamber, where the same doesn't...
He's not an echo chamber of the Zionist, is he? And of course, if we criticize their wars, their genocides, the way they conduct their wars, the way they start their wars with aggression, if we criticize their assassinations and their coups, we're the bad guys, right? We're the evil ones. Well, meanwhile, we're still waiting to see what's going to happen with Mitch McConnell, but I thought this was really funny. Somebody put this meme up, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This is Mitch McConnell. Of course, if you're listening on radio, you can't see this, but it's Mitch McConnell next to Granny from the Beverly Hillbillies. They are spot on dead ringers here. And the person put this up said, little did we know that Granny Clampett had another son they never told us about. She left him behind in Tennessee when they moved to Beverly Hills. But again, when you look at the whole Mitch McConnell thing, the fact that they were able to keep this quiet and not have anybody talk about it for nearly a month, and now it's been over a month, And they still haven't, as many people are saying, can't the governor of Kentucky, this Democrat who is looking at this, now he doesn't have the power to appoint a successor. Republicans took that away from him, I think, in anticipation of what would happen to Mitch McConnell. They did that in 2024. They have a supermajority of Republicans in the state of Kentucky. And so they took away the power for the governor to appoint a successor for Mitch. But they have to only stall this until August the 3rd, which is only another couple of weeks. And we look at how long they've been able to run. They've been going with this thing now for about 6 weeks. So if they can keep it up for another 2 weeks, then there won't be a special election. And that's, they're willing to lie and to shame themselves in public to keep that from happening. It's the same kind of thing that we saw with Mike Johnson, delaying and delaying and delaying what was happening with the Epstein files, and shutting down Congress and refusing to seat someone during the election because they did not want to have those released. Meanwhile, when you look at lies and the vanity of Trump, this whole thing about the reflecting pond truly is a reflection. It's a reflection really on both sides that are obsessed with this pond, but it's also a reflection on Trump, who, when things did not work out very well with his no-bid contract with a person who had been convicted multiple times of bribing politicians, then he started casting the blame on people who didn't like him. People were saying, well, show us the video of these people who put a 300-foot gash in the pool. Well, they have now drained it, and now you can see what it looks like. And you can see, just as the reporters who went there were telling us, now you can see it for your own self. There is no 300-foot gash. That thing line down the middle is for drainage. It was there before. And as many people are pointing out, perhaps it was Trump and his entourage. They thought that'd be a great idea and a lot of fun if they were to drive down this thing. And they did that before it got filled up. They did that while it was still being worked on. If there is any gash, which, again, there's not really much evidence of any of that, but if there is a gash, it's in a line that looks like it's a little bit worn that would kind of correspond to their tire print. And there's a picture of the motorcade that he decided he would drive down the center of the pool. So it is kind of interesting how he projects that onto other people. So we're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, I want to talk about what is happening in terms of the ICE, so-called law enforcement. Look, I am all about protecting the borders. And I think the people should be sent back if they came here illegally. But I've always said that I think the right way to approach this is to, first of all, turn off the welfare magnet. If people want to work here, I don't really have that much of a problem with it. They should not be allowed to vote. But I have a problem with people working here if they're supporting themselves. But no welfare for people, no magnet to bring people in, no free education for this. No, absolutely not. But when you look at what Trump is doing, the way that he is enforcing this, it is actually making it much worse. And so he is going to destroy any consensus to say that we need to control our borders just by the over-the-top way that they are operating with people. But we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
We've had 2 murders by the people in ICE. And I say murders because I really do believe they were not justified. These people were not threatened. We have in both of these cases, apparently, people who were afraid. Why would they be afraid? Well, you've got these guys who are wearing masks, who don't identify themselves, who glory in their intimidation and their confrontation. Again, wearing masks, you don't know who they are, but there's a reputation about this. And people foolishly run. Then they see that as a license to kill. And so there was one that happened in Houston last week, one that just happened a couple of days ago in Maine. And the situation in Maine, the guy appeared to be confused. And as he had been shot, the person shot him through the windshield as they pulled him out. He said, I tried to stop, but he died. An eyewitness heard that. And they come out with their own stories about what happened. Oh, they rammed us, or they tried to run us down. We've heard this story before. And we've seen them lie before about this. And I got to say, I don't like the massive waves of illegal immigration. I understand what that's about. I understand that is to divide and conquer a country. We see it happening throughout Europe. We know exactly what that agenda is about. And of course, it comes through the UN and a lot of the NGOs that are globalist in terms of their orientation. But let's not make the mistake of giving carte blanche to the people who say, do whatever you need to do to throw these people out. If you do that, if you give that kind of power to government, that is the very worst thing that can happen. The very worst criminal you can have is a criminal who's wearing the badge. And that's the thing that we need to fear the most. Far more than somebody who's been here for 34, 35 years, never had any issues with law enforcement, was working and supporting himself and his family. That is not nearly an issue, if it is an issue at all. That is not the issue, if you the dangerous existential issue to us, that if we have law enforcement that is not trained and is not trying to do a measured, reasonable response, they have to be held to a higher standard because they have so much power. It is a very dangerous thing to give that kind of unrestrained power to people. So, yet again, people are trying to get evidence from the federal government. They do not want to give the evidence. As a matter of fact, we've seen this type of thing in the past before. I remember when I was at InfoWars, and there was a situation there. There was a bank that had just been robbed. The police were there in the bank investigating the robbery, and a black guy comes up to go into the bank, and the door is locked. He pulls on it, it won't open. And then a policeman starts coming after him. He got very scared when he saw a cop there. He started running. Now, the cop took that as an admission of guilt for some reason, chased him down the road. They eventually caught the guy under a bridge. They had a struggle, and he wound up killing the guy who ran away. And you look at this and you say, well, why would they run when they see the police if they hadn't done something? Well, because the black community looks at this and says, well, I know how this is likely going to happen if I don't get away from this guy. So it propagates. And I remember that Art Acevedo, who was the police chief in Austin at the time, he was big pals with Alex Jones. And he later became police chief in Houston, I should say. But he was there at the time, and Jakari Jackson rightfully confronted him. Alex wouldn't do it, but Jakari did over that. And boy, did Alex get mad that he confronted Art Acevedo, but it was not justified. And Acevedo just instinctively sided with the police. There's absolutely no reason for them to get into a fight and a struggle. As many people pointed out, the more experienced people at ICE have blown the whistle on this. They said, the reason this is happening is because we got quotas. We got quotas. We got to have 2,000 arrests per day. And if your department is not doing that, people are getting fired for not meeting these quotas from the Trump administration. Not only that, but they made 80% of them work on 4th of July even. And as one guy was saying, look, who was more experienced, he said, look, if somebody's going to run, let them run. We'll find them later. We've got their information. We can arrest them later. Don't put yourself in a bad situation. In other words, just like this Renee Good situation, don't jump in front of the car, then pull out your gun and shoot them if they don't immediately or can't stop. Oh, you're going to run me down. Well, you jumped in front of the car. Don't put yourself in a bad way, he said. Just let them run and we can catch them later. Many police have wised up about this in terms of stopping high-speed pursuit of people as well. You can find them later. Don't put a lot of lives at risk, including your own. And so Maine was a new recruit, the guy that was there, and he was obviously not that well trained. But we also need to take a look at perhaps who's doing the training. When you look at Chicago, for example, it has now been shown that you have more than 121 ex-Israeli operatives are now serving as ICE agents in Chicago alone. Is that a problem? I think that really is a problem, especially when you look at how they typically engage people in Israel. We don't want those tactics brought here.
One thing that most mainstream outlets don't talk about is that the Israelis are already in the United States training local police departments. We know, for example, that the Israelis are training the Atlanta police, that this area now called Cop City is the site of Israeli police and Israeli IDF training our own police. I don't want the Israelis training American police departments. The Israelis have no respect for human rights or civil liberties.
That's right. And neither does the federal government either. As a matter of fact, I remember one of the first really heinous body camera footage of a guy who was needlessly killed. It was on the outskirts, I believe, of Phoenix at the time. He was a homeless guy. He's up in the hills. Police wanted him to come down. And it was a very prolonged situation. They eventually wound up shooting the guy who was no threat to them or to anybody else and sticking the dogs on him after they had shot him. And there was a guy who taught at the State Police Academy, and he said, I'm done with this. This is coming from the federal government. This is a shoot-first curriculum that they're teaching people in the police academy. And this was over a decade ago. This type of attitude coming from the federal government, now also perhaps coming from the IDF, being brought in to train people in Cop City. This is the attitude that they have towards people, and this is why we do not want to have the federalization of the police. When you look at this, I pointed out yesterday, the LA Police Department is pulling back on their flock cameras. But they're pulling back not because they're concerned about individual liberty, but they're concerned about the fact they want to protect particular groups. It's this leftist groupism that is out there. San Francisco doing the same thing, Portland doing the same thing, Oakland doing the same thing. They said in Oakland what we tried to do was to tie it to surveillance transparency, which is basically the idea that the public deserves to know what kind of spying the government is doing on the populace, and it deserves regular and transparent reporting. I don't want transparent surveillance, folks. I want to end surveillance. The government should not be spying on us, especially without a warrant. And so a lot of people are pushing back against the flock cameras, however, for the right reason. Here's a good example of it, what is happening in both Houston as well as in New Mexico.
According to a crowdsourcing map, this is a flock camera. Well, it used to be. If you take a little bit of a closer look, you can tell it looks like it's been cut down. And the camera itself, it's nowhere to be found. Growing distaste for flock cameras is manifesting in Harris County two ways. Through public means.
Having flock in Harris County makes us less safe. It puts all our county's residents' lives at risk of mass surveillance.
And vandalism.
That there was no rhyme or reason to where these cameras were placed. The county essentially allowed flock to take over our streets by placing ALRPRs anywhere they pleased.
Eyewitness News has found at least half a dozen flock cameras cut down across Harris County. Houston police saying so far no one has been arrested, but they are investigating. The destruction comes as county commissioners voted unanimously Thursday to amend their contract with Flock, not to restrict Flock, but to ensure the device is available for use countywide. The cameras collect information and can be accessed by agencies who have contracts with the company, like law enforcement. Experts tell ABC 13 public distaste for the cameras is growing nationwide.
Yeah, it is growing nationwide, but their response there in Houston is to double down and extend it. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking to Gerald Celente of TrendsJournal.com. Stay with us. We've got some very important things to talk about in terms of what's going on with the economy, as well as with war and peace. We will be right back, folks.
listening to The David Knight Show.
Joining us now is Gerald Celente of TrendsJournal.com. Gerald has always been ahead of the curve in terms of trends for decades. An excellent publication. And, of course, you can get 10% off if you use the code KNIGHT at TrendsJournal.com. Thank you for joining us, Gerald.
Thank you. And by the way, you put the code in, it costs you the grand total of $2.50 a week. Here's a cover. This is from the Trends Journal. This is when what's with my glasses here?
I love your cover this week. Instead of Uncle Sam, you've got Benjamin Netanyahu there, and I want you, and he does want us, and they want to merge with us. I've been playing a thing about that, the number to call to stop that. You're spot on. They want to control us, and to
show you the way I feel about the political system. This is the election running for election 2012. There's Obama and that other clown running against him. Lesser two evils.
Two-headed vampire,
yeah. This is 2012, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is you talked about the cover of the magazine. Some warmongering little lowlife, Milikowski. Oh, I changed my name. It's Netanyahu now. Oh, and my kid. That's not fighting over there. He's over there in Florida.
Yeah.
He changed his name too, so people don't know who he is. Yeah,
that's right.
This is Netanyahu. Could you see that?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. His that's his Acme Warner Brothers cartoon bomb that he had that everybody trolled him about. 2 weeks away.
2012, saying that.
And now you got Trump saying that, they were 2 weeks away. I mean, he's just reading the script from this guy. Does he not realize how discredited those lies are? For 30 plus years, he's been telling us that they're 2 weeks away with their nuclear bomb. Did you hear what Trump said? He said, well, they would have had a nuclear bomb in 2 weeks if we hadn't used nuclear with them.
And this is what he's saying here.
Yeah.
This is 2012, selling this damn lie. But being that Israel's the chosen people, they could have nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or they have between 90 and 400 nuclear warheads.
Wow.
What Israel is doing is one of the most disgusting,
I agree,
murderous acts in modern history. You see these pictures coming out of how they've been torturing these Palestinians that they arrested.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now they stole 70% of Gaza.
Wow.
They're doing it into ruins.
Doing it in Lebanon as well. Same process in Lebanon.
They've thrown out 1.2 million people out of Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
Bombing the hell out of it. And as we said, go back to your Trends Journal. We said there's not going to be a peace deal. This is all Trump crap. I can't use the word because I don't want to get you blacklisted, but it's not BS, it's Trump-S. And about, we got a peace deal, all right? We're going to another 60 days, all right? And again, they bombed, they hit a ship in the Strait of Hormuz. Oh, yeah. Iran is saying that these ships are illegally going through their waters.
Mm-hmm.
And they told them not to go through, and the United States is pushing them through. This war is serious.
Yeah.
And you go back to your Trends Journal, for 2 months, we've been saying that there's not going to be a peace deal and that Trump is going to ramp up the war during the summer because the people are in a summer state of mind. They're totally out of tune. They're out of tune when it's already any time.
Yeah.
But now they're more out of tune in what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea.
So lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer, as the song goes, right? And everybody's feeling kind of lazy and hazy. So he's going to use that opportunity to move in. I thought it was great. Did you see that the people who trolled him with Epstein put up a trophy on the National Mall lawn, and they called it the Trump Participation Trophy. And they said, here's your trophy for showing up for the war. You're not winning it, but here's your trophy for showing up. And they also designated it as a trophy drop-off point. They said, perhaps if Trump gets enough trophies, he'll leave everything alone and go do something else. He's desperate to get a peace trophy, isn't he? And wasn't it funny, the fact that FIFA, the International Soccer Affiliation, of course they call it football, but I'll let them name it since it's their game. So the Football Association gave him a peace prize, their inaugural peace prize. They'd never given anybody a peace prize before. And he stole the one that was given by the Nobel Committee to the Venezuelan politician. He basically browbeat her into handing it over to him. It's amazing how he is obsessed with this and how he is obsessed with war.
Yep. And again, all this crap about nuclear, and this is from your Trends Journal, 3rd March. That Trump said that you see we're having I might have forced their hand. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion they were going to attack first. They were going to attack. I felt strongly about that, and based on the way negotiations were going, I think they were going to attack first. And I didn't want that to happen. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand, but Israel was ready, and we're ready. And we've had a very, very powerful impact. You ready? Because virtually everything they have has been knocked out.
Yeah.
That was March 3rd.
Everything about that was a lie, isn't it?
Yeah, because going back, he's selling the crap. Hey, these guys are going to have nuclear weapons, all right? They're going to have nuclear. No, hey, liar, you said they were going to attack first, and that's why you attacked them. Right out of your fat mouth.
Yeah.
That's what you said. Not a word about nuclear.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought they were going to attack us, so we initiated the war. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and again, as a close combat guy, you only attack the attacker. So I can't stand the guy across the street. Hey, I thought he was going to attack me, so I blew his brains out, all right? Oh, that's okay. Yeah, let him out of jail. That's fine. Hey, I thought that other guy was going to hit me. I blew his brains out. That's fine. You thought he was going to attack you. You have every right to do it. No, you don't.
Yeah.
President, all right? I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, did you see the way he looked at me? You know, it was if looks could kill, it would have been me instead of him. But I got him first, you know. Yeah, that's right. That's one of the reasons why I said earlier in the program, I think that's why Marco Rubio is saying we're going to take apart the International Criminal Court brick by brick, because they know that they are international criminals, just like Netanyahu and Gallant. So are the Trump administration people. They'd be doing it at the behest of Israel alone, but they know they've also committed international war crimes as well.
Yep.
When you look at what's going on in Venezuela, as you know, what they're doing in terms of blowing up ships, they can't do that.
Cuba. How about Cuba?
Cuba, yeah.
Oh, and that little Hague shit comes out. They're a terrorist threat to us. What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
A tiny little nothing of a country.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. It was before he was born that there was something of a threat. But that was the Cuban Missile Crisis. That happened when I was 8 years old, and it's way before his time. So, they're not a threat to the United States. The United States is a threat to most other countries. They're a threat to peace.
Look what we're doing. Look at the wars. Look at the people, the money that we've spent to kill people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they want another $350 billion over this record $1 trillion budget, but that's not even where it ends. You have Mike Johnson saying Trump wants to double the defense budget. So as they hit $1 trillion for the first time, now we're going for $2 trillion. This is the kind of rapid acceleration of the national debt that we have seen in the first Trump administration and continuing into the second Trump administration. He put us on a whole new slope in his first administration, and now he is going to accelerate that again, and he's going to increase the slope even more.
Yeah, but the rich are getting richer. His big, beautiful bill gives the corporations all the deals they want. They can make more money. The rich, look at all the money his family's making. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, so he won again. We wrote when his bill in 2017 is again, according to the Tax Policy Center, the top 1% got 64% of the benefits.
That's right. That's right.
And he spews out the crap. Hey, we're going to give them this money so they could reinvest in the country. No, they're buying back stocks. 2018 was one of the biggest years of stock buybacks. That's all they're doing. The rich are getting, there's no relationship between Wall Street and Main Street. Totally different place. Again, 1% own 54% of the markets. When you look at Vanguard, State Street, and BlackRock, the value of the S&P 500, they own 88% of the value of it, according to what you Google it in. 88%. 3 companies. And when you put the 10% in, 10% own 93% of the stock markets.
And when you look at the amount of money that's in the stock market right now in this AI bubble, you got so many people who are calling it and saying, this is a very dangerous situation. You have most of the stock market valuation is in very narrow, almost like a pin, that to burst this bubble. And there was the Shiller Index that looked at this in terms of price and valuation. They said in his index, he said, right now we're in the low 40s. I forget what the exact number was, 41 or something. And he said the Great Depression, it was in the low 30s. So we're above even that bubble that happened. And he said, typically it's around 17, but we're like at 41 and a half or 42 and a half or something like that. It's just, it's sitting there, it's ready to go. And there is so much. I've got a clip here on the deck that I didn't play today yet. And the guy is talking about how there is so much more money in this than was in the dot-com bust. And we just had IBM have its worst stock devaluation in a day that they've ever had, a record amount that came down. What do you think is going on with this?
Well, it's one of our top trends of the year, dot-com bust 2.0. And by the way, this is your Trends Journal, and it used to be a quarterly. This is autumn 1999. Dot-com this. Dot-com overload will short-circuit many high expectations for huge profits in internet commerce, entertainment, and wide array of dot-com services. Following the holiday season, many of today's high-flying internet stocks, the hottest IPOs, and newly emerging IPO wannabes will have begun their deep descent from their overvalued heights. We warned that the market would crash by the second quarter of 2000, and it did. And we're saying, and here's the other thing that has to really be very important to look at. Trends are born, they grow, they mature, reach old age, and die. I'm going back to the dot-com bust, the first one. The internet revolution was just born in the early 1990s. And everybody started investing like crazy in all of these crazy companies. The AI revolution just began 4 years ago, 2022. You don't invest all your money in the infant companies that were born. They're still in its infant stage.
And of course, the internet was something that was very useful, very real, and got to be very big. But the optimism got so far ahead of the reality that once people reacted to it, it was an overreaction in the other direction. And that's what we're going to see with AI. I absolutely believe that, yeah.
Now, here's the most important part of it. As I say, the business of America is war, and the business of China is business. China's going to lead the world in AI. They're investing we're writing it. It's in your Trends Journal week after week. All the data's there. The companies are going more and more all around the world. They're going for AI from China. It's cheaper and it's better in many aspects. And again, the trend has just been born. And again, you're talking about increasing the defense budget. Go back to February 2025. Trump, hey, I'm going to cut the defense budget by $500 million. All right? All right? How about the Trump, hey, you elect me, I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop a war. All right? All right? Hey, you elect me, I'm going to let Ukraine war in 24 hours. All right? Hey, now that I'm elected, I'm going to let Ukraine war. It's going to end before I get inaugurated. All right? How could people put up with the crap lying guy that's the dictator of this country?
Yeah. And I as my tribute to Lindsey Graham, I pointed out that he and John McCain were there at the Ukraine Revolution. And in 2016, they were there telling these poor Ukrainian soldiers who probably are all dead at this point in time, next year we're going to go into Russia. 2017, you're going into Russia, and we're going to get Putin. That was 6 years before Putin invaded. These guys, stoking these wars everywhere they go, it's insane what they were doing. But you're talking about China, and how they have the edge on AI. As a matter of fact, a lot of major companies, I've got an article, DoorDash, Airbnb, Siemens, many others are moving from the American AI companies to the Chinese AI companies for a couple of different reasons. First of all, they're cheaper. Secondly, they can even run them open weight, so they can run them locally on their own machines and not be tethered to this, this cloud situation. All of that, I think, is going to come together, Gerald. What do you think? The massive capital expenditures that they've been doing, they can't keep that up unless they start making massive amounts of money to start making that happen. I see exactly the opposite thing. People are looking at their bills and they're saying, you're starting to see the rates go skyrocket on the users here on American AI companies. You're paying a lot more for a lot less time. And now you got the Chinese competition that's there as well. If that starts to go down, that could be the thing that starts to the downward spiral on this that creates the bubble collapse. What do you think?
Yes. Again, when the markets, they're going to crash.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question about it. It's only a matter of when, and I believe it's going to be around October. Because again, the people are in some state of mind right now. And then after the holidays, reality again hits the street. And that's when you look at the 29 crash, the 87 crash, 86, 87. It's October or March.
And yet, even just this last week, we had IBM stock went down, I think it's 25%. It was even more than it dropped in 1987, famously. And so, what is going on with this? I mean, it is, again, it's just a few stocks that are very narrowly focused. OpenAI, as well as Anthropic, pulled back their IPOs. They were going to go public with their stock, and they pulled it back. That's not a good sign, is it?
Nope.
Not a sign of confidence. Yeah.
You have to look at what's going on in the private credit sectors too. People want their money out because they invested, a lot of these private sector companies invested in software companies and other high-tech companies that AI's wiping them out. The people want their money back and they're not getting it back. They're only getting small percentages of it back. And going back onto the AI bust, the reality hits the streets when Wall Street goes down. Main Street is already suffering. All the data is there showing it. When the reality hits the street is when the equity markets crash. And when the equity markets crash, this is not going to be the Great Recession or the Great Depression. It's going to be the Greatest Depression because everything has been artificially pumped up since the COVID war with all that cheap money that they pumped in there to artificially prop up the economies with money backed by nothing and printed on nothing.
The original AI, the artificial investment.
Yeah. Well, no, AI is the future. I mean, love it, what it is. And it's going to wipe out a lot of jobs. It's already doing it.
Yeah.
And but China's going to lead the world in it. But here's my concern. As I say, when all else fails, they take you to war.
That's right.
And there's going to be a false flag event that will unite the people to fight against Iran. And it will go nuclear. That's my other fear. And the other thing is, you were talking before about Lindsey Graham going to, and John McCain, insane McCain, going to Ukraine. That Ukraine war is ramping up too. Germany just is sending them another 50,000 drones. And one country after another in Europe, not all of them, but many of them, sending them more and more weapons, secure and intelligence, and on and on and on. They're actually fighting the war. And I'm concerned that that's going to go nuclear as well.
Oh yeah,
and not a peep about peace. What is the Pope got lockjaw now? What the Pope dressed up in his costumes? Where are all these religions? How come none of them are out there? Where are all the religions? The Quakers dying in an earthquake? Where's everybody?
Well, I say that frequently. I say, we have so many people who, many of them, it took them a while to come around to understanding what was really happening with abortion. When they did, they started to do the right thing. But they still will cheer what is happening in Israel with genocide. They'll still cheer the wars. I said, how is that pro-life? I mean, how can you defend an innocent baby before it's born and not defend an innocent child who's 8 or 9 or 10 years old? You know,
Total
I just don't
hypocrisy.
understand that.
No, it's hypocrisy. They're crazy people.
Yeah. Well, they're
Again,
blinded.
we got crazy people running the world in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
If
They're blinded by
If Hitler or Mussolini said the stuff coming out of Trump's mouth, we'd be reading about it in our history books. Hey, you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to bomb you into the Stone Age. All right?
That's right. That's right.
I'm going to annihilate you. If Hitler or Mussolini said the things that Trump is saying, we'd be reading about it in our history books.
Well, he's a very dangerous gangster, and we all knew that. You know, he's coming out of the casino world and all the rest of it. Where does he get his money from? Another fellow casino crime figure. You know, people point out Miriam Adelson, who's got so much money and giving hundreds of millions of dollars to Trump. Where'd she get that hundreds of millions of dollars? She ripped off Americans in these casinos. Yeah. And so it really is he's hung out with these organized crime figures. He hung out with the professional wrestling people. He knows how to run a fraud. He just had the 2-year anniversary of his fraudulent assassination attempt. Somebody, I pointed this out yesterday. I saw a meme on social media, and they said, he thinks that Iran's going to try to assassinate him. Well, here's a tip, Iran. Don't shoot him in the ears. They grow back.
No, again, now think about this. Suppose Iran assassinated our president, his wife, and his kids, and a grandkid.
Yeah.
We'd be at war like that.
That's right.
But it's okay for the United States and Israel to assassinate the head of Iran, his wife, his kids, and his grandkids.
That's right.
That's fine. That's fine.
And a general from the last last time Trump was president, he assassinated the general that they had there as well. Yeah, all that is fine. Yeah, we're okay with assassinations as long as it's us doing it. But it's an absolute outrage if anybody else were to do that, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it really is sad.
And there's no outrage in this country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
That's
Nothing.
right.
I got to tell you, I'm heartbroken that the people have lost their guts and they don't fight back. The little clowns. Let me tell you a quick Lindsey Graham story. You've been up to my place up here.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I used to be on Fox all the time. And Oprah, the Today Show. I used to be on everybody. And they got me off because I hate war. And yet there's nobody on the media talking about peace. You won't find one person.
That's right.
Anyway, the Libyan conflict was breaking out with the Nobel Peace of Crap Prize winner Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Samantha Power, and Susan Rice. They were the four behind pushing the overthrow of Gaddafi.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm tired of hearing this crap. If only women were in charge, we'd be a little more. You're like Madeline, not all that bright, saying, Leslie Stahl, the price of 500,000 people, kids under 5 years old that died because what Bill Clinton did in Iraq was, quote, worth the price. You could Google it up. Yeah. And how about Margaret Thatcher? Again, good and bad, I want to make this 1,000% clear, comes in every race, creed, and color.
That's
and
right.
gender.
That's
Don't want
right.
to hear that.
Yeah,
Anyway.
Madeleine Albright didn't even have the decency to say, we didn't kill 500,000. She just said, it's worth it. Yeah, that's
worth
amazing.
the price.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So anyway, Fox used to send up satellite trucks back then. I'm on the air with a top ex-CIA guy, and he's defending the United States attacking. And I'm going through Libya's the richest country in Africa. The people have more rights and benefits than most people in the world. A wonderful tourism place. And what do they want to do? They want to get off the dollar, and they want the people in Africa to go on a gold standard.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they're knocking them out.
That's right.
And all of a sudden I hear, Mr. Salenti, we have to take a break now. Senator Lindsey Graham's coming on. All right? A little clown jerk. I'm hearing the crap spewing out of that. You should rot in hell, you warmongering little freak bastard.
Yeah.
I'm getting cut off for some clown from North Carolina. Where the hell he's from?
Yeah. He's going to sell the war. There's not a war that he wouldn't sell. And,
I know.
And,
I'm telling you what they did to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he's their antidote to you. He's their antidote to peace. Yeah, he's killing all the right people, and we're getting our money's worth. Look at how many Russians we're killing.
Let's put this all in context. All of these warmongers. What do you got? That guy? What's that guy? That's the head, the congressman. That's the head. What's his name? Johnson. What's his name?
Mike Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you imagine that little boy fighting? Could you imagine Rubio fighting? Could you imagine Lindsey Graham fighting? Could you imagine Trump fighting?
Yeah, if Mike Johnson's going to do it, they're going to have to give him that serum they gave to the nerd, turn him into Captain America, right?
Anybody that supports war, go over there and fight or shut your fat mouth.
That's right.
You got it?
Yeah, I would absolutely say that about Ben Shapiro, for example. He was out there singing the praises of Lindsey Graham, this guy who never saw a war that he didn't want to get us involved in. He never saw a war that he didn't want to expand and make more deadly. I am sick and tired of these warmongers who don't even have any shame about it anymore. That's the worst aspect of it. They're shameless in their promotion of death and war. I don't understand why people aren't fed up with this. I agree with you.
I know. That's what I'm telling you. They're not upset.
Yeah, they're not.
It's Ben Shapiro. You didn't say it right.
Well, it's going to come back on them in dollars and cents because this stuff doesn't make any sense and it is not sustainable. And if they're going to take us up to a $2 trillion defense budget, where we're already $40 trillion in debt, this house of cards is going to come tumbling down, isn't it?
No, it's not 40 trillion. When you put in Social Security, even you go to Fortune magazine, they even wrote about it. It's more like 126 trillion.
That's right. Yeah, what they are already obligated to pay in terms of things like Social Security is what you're talking about. Yeah, even just the direct debt of we gave this money to the Pentagon that we don't have, and just piling it up that way. But when you look at all the entitlement programs and the unfunded mandates that they have, that's what you're talking about, going up to 160 trillion. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, it's heartbreaking what's happened to this country. Heartbreaking. And there's no pushback. Very little. Very, very little.
That's right. Yeah, and they really don't understand where this is all heading. And the same thing is happening even as they're ramping up all this stuff. They're ramping up the police state here domestically. You look at what's happening with Flock, and now they've got, Gerald, I didn't get to this before you came on, but they're actually, in many different cities, they're putting up a literal flock of flying cameras to do surveillance on people, drone surveillance against Americans. I mean, as Madison said, the instruments of defense abroad will become weapons of tyranny at home. Boy, did these guys not understand human nature or what? I mean, they understood exactly what was happening and would happen with government because they understood the nature of man. It's not about different classes of people fighting each other. It's about human nature. Regardless of whether you're rich or poor, they understand that this power and wealth that is there in government is an addictive drug, and they just can't get enough of it.
No, and again, this is just the beginning of this surveillance. What are they doing? Like in the UK, if they have a picture of you and that picture says that you're a thief or whatever, they arrest you.
Mm-hmm. And that's how he started here in the U.S. And the flock cameras are a big part of that as well. They identify people.
They're using AI also to say what kind of person that you are. Mm-hmm. And if you have a criminal record, they're arresting people like crazy. And again, this is just the beginning of it. Again, look what ICE did. In a sense, breaking into people's homes without any warrants or anything.
Wearing a mask.
No outrage.
Yeah. Yeah, wearing a mask. You can't, I'm not going to show you my ID. And if you take a picture of me, there's a picture that's going around, a woman who's holding up her phone and take a picture of his face, and he's spraying her in the face with pepper spray.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what happens. I remember it was an outrage when you had I don't even remember what the students were protesting. It really doesn't matter. They have a right to protest peacefully. So they're sitting there in a peaceful protest, and you got this fat campus cop that is there at Berkeley, and he's just walking down the road, people spraying him right in the face with the pepper spray, like point blank. And that was outrageous, but that's now being done by ICE, and they're killing people in the streets as well. You have artificial intelligence identifying people and the police saying, well, that's it. If they were fingered by AI, it's no question about it. So they've been locking people up. People have been injured when they were arrested by the police, totally innocent. They eventually proved that they were in another state at the time the crime that the police were investigating was in question. And that's why I think, Gerald, AI is not going to go away. When it comes to the money, if money is an issue, the government will shower them with cash, just like they're doing to the Pentagon now, because they want to have that weapon that is going to be pointed at you and I and every American. Yep. And they will do anything to keep that going, any amount of money. And so I don't, when I look at that, I say, well, I wonder if that's even going to keep keep it from having a stock market crash, because maybe the government will come in and just start pouring money into the stock market to keep the AI companies going, pouring money into their coffers.
China's going to wipe them out. Again, you go back to 2025 and DeepSeek, a company that nobody ever heard of, comes out. They could put out it doesn't cost them $100 million to do AI. It cost them $6 million.
Yeah.
You saw NVIDIA stock go down. They lost $800 billion in one day. It dove 17%. No, it came back. Yeah. But I'm just telling you, this thing is going to hit hard. And look, again, you don't have to look at other facts. Who's leading the world in electric vehicles? Oh, it's not Ford, not General Motors, not BMW. Oh, Volkswagen just fired what? They're firing 50,000 people? China.
Yeah.
China's leading the world.
Well, it's been decided a long time ago they're going to be given an advantage in terms of manufacturing. And it's not just a China price where they could go in and steal intellectual property or manipulate the currency or have slave labor. They went in with the climate change accord and made sure they had cheap energy. That was so much cheaper that nobody can compete with them in terms of manufacturing. Just on that basis alone.
Go back. Yeah, you've seen this shirt I did. Remember that one? Could you see it?
That's right, Slick Willie.
Yep, beware Slick Willie. That's the guy that got the jobs out of here, brought them to NAFTA down in Mexico. Hey, you get cheap labor down there. And brought China into the World Trade Organization 25 years ago. The manufacturers went there for cheap labor. And here's the deal. Oh, you want to come to China? Yeah, you got to go in partners with us. You can own 49% of the company. The United States and Europe gave China all the high tech and heavy industry technology they never had. Never had. And now they got it all.
That's right. And what is Trump's response? His response is not to free up our markets, but to add taxes at the border and to add costs to manufacturing that we do. And he is following exactly the same plan that the Chinese Communist Party did. You can, we'll keep your business going, but I get a partnership in it. We're going to make the American government a partner in this. And probably his family is going to make a profit out of that, or Lutnick's family or Besant's family is going to make a profit out of that as well. It's exactly the same model that we have seen in communist China.
No, with all due respect, it's not communism, it's fascism.
That's right, yeah,
merger
exactly.
of state and corporate powers. That's the definition by Mussolini.
That's right. They use communism as an alias to confuse people, but it is economic fascism. You're absolutely right. Yeah,
it's fascism, the merger of state and corporate powers.
And that's what we're having right now. And it was an article I covered. I think it was $30 billion that Trump has had the American government put into 27 different companies. And, and they're buying a stake in it. I mean, they're not just, this isn't the kind of old-fashioned malinvestment of the past when we had Republicans and Democrats say, all right, this company is failing. It's a big car company, so we're going to give you a big pile of cash. Here you go. Hope you make it. No, this is becoming a business partner with them. And as Ron Paul was pointing out, that also distorts the capital markets, because now people say, well, the government has picked them as a winner. They're not going to allow them to fail. And so I'll buy stock in them as well. That's why I say, this whole AI bubble, stock bubble thing, I think that's going to be one of the things that they try to do. I don't know if it'll be successful or not, but I think they will pour massive amounts of money into these particular corporations and into the stock market in general to try to protect it from the plunge. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. Yeah.
No, because China's going to lead the world in this thing, and they're going to be losing money. And people are going to be pulling their stocks out again. Look what's going on in the private equity sector. Very important.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's in your Trends Journal, trendsjournal.com, trendsjournal.com. If you want to read history before it happens. And by the way, I would never thought gold and silver prices would have gone down as much as they have.
Yeah.
And the primary reason they're going down is that the dollar is going up because the other currencies are going down because of this war.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to cover their debt that they're losing because of the cost of this war. Again, the cover of your Trends Journal a couple of weeks ago, 2 warmongers start a war that's destroying the global economy that 8 billion people are paying the price for, and 8 billion people can't stop 2 guys. 8 billion people can't stop 2 guys.
That's right. That's what's happening with this. And you're right. You know, when you look at this, the central banks who had got into gold in a very heavy way, and a lot of them are having to liquidate their position. Yep. And yet at the same time, we have a record number of central banks say they're going to increase their position in gold the next year. They understand it's on sale. And so if they're not in a difficult situation, as many of them are, whether they have to depend on oil for their income or whether they have to pay higher prices because they're importing all the oil, that's what's causing them to liquidate. And that's really one of the functions that gold serves as a store of value for that kind of a liquidation. Yeah.
I'm bullish on it long term. And again, I've been buying gold. My first time was $166 an ounce back in the late 70s, you know. So I buy it and put it away. That's the way I think about it. But anyway, when the markets crash, gold prices are going to spike beyond the belief.
I agree.
And again, there's going to be a market crash. Again, you talked about the Shiller Index. I saw that as well. And he's 100% right. They're way overvalued, the PE ratio. And it doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for having me on.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on. Gerald Celente, trendsjournal.com. And again, I'll just remind you, you can save 10% off with the code NIGHT. Thank you so much, Gerald. Folks, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Making sense common again. You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Welcome back, folks. And I want to go back and start that report that we had before. We had to go to Gerald. It was the top of the hour. I think it's very important to see the people who are organized pulling back and fighting these flock cameras. Now, they don't know who is cutting them down in Houston, and the police there are concerned because they said nobody will say anything to them about it. There's widespread pushback against this. And as one of our commentators said yesterday on here, leaving a comment on Rumble, he said, this is the Boston Tea Party of our day. I believe it is. Jerry Alatalo says, Trump and Rubio on International Criminal Court, they're taking our sovereignty. Yet when you look at Trump and Rubio on Section 219 of the NDAA, merging U.S. and Israel intelligence and military. They say no comment. Yeah, that's not taking our sovereignty, is it? And ON61, thank you very much. I appreciate the tip. Thank you. Bin Laden Bernanke, one says, Trump, the fiat president. Trump would say to that, thank you. I'm the man who got the fiat made in America. Actually, that's Obama, but don't let the facts get in the way. Absolutely right. Yeah. And DG8, thank you for the tip. He says, I can't wait till the Democrats get in, LOL. At least the so-called right will oppose the surveillance state at that point in time. And they will oppose wasteful spending, presidential executive orders, the police state. MAGA has no principles. They'll only oppose it when the other people are doing it. And make no mistake about it, the other people are itching to do it. $2+ trillion defense budget, he says, just in time to merge our military with Israel. These demons will squeeze out every dime of the American tax cattle. I love my country, but hate my government. I absolutely agree. And here are some people who don't like the government spying on them. And there's a great couple of pieces that we got here. One of them is in Houston. The other one is in New Mexico. I really like the New Mexico guy. He got caught, but he is unrepentant about this as well. Here's the report.
According to a crowdsourcing map, this is a flock camera. Well, it used to be. If you take a little bit of a closer look, you can tell it looks like it's been cut down. And the camera itself, it's nowhere to be found. Growing distaste for flock cameras is manifesting in Harris County two ways. Through public means.
Having flock in Harris County makes us less safe. It puts all our county's residents' lives at risk of mass surveillance.
And vandalism.
That there was no rhyme or reason to where these cameras were placed. The county essentially allowed flock to take over our streets by placing ALRPRs anywhere they pleased.
Eyewitness News has found at least half a dozen flock cameras cut down across Harris County. Houston police saying so far no one has been arrested, but they are investigating. The destruction comes as county commissioners voted unanimously Thursday to amend their contract with Flock, not to restrict Flock, but to ensure the device is available for use countywide. The cameras collect information and can be accessed by agencies who have contracts with the company, like law enforcement. Experts tell ABC 13 public distaste for the cameras is growing nationwide, along with concerns for mass surveillance, privacy, and data sharing. While security cameras capture an area, Flock says their system uses machine learning to take clear photos of license plates and store it with a physical description of the cars.
After a bizarre scene in court today, a judge says she will issue an arrest warrant for the man accused of vandalizing license plate readers in Rio Rancho, but he says he has no intention to stop his actions.
Do you have plans to continue to take down these flock cameras?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. They are a clear and present threat to public safety.
44-year-old Javon Martinez is facing larceny, property damage, and tampering with evidence charges after police say he destroyed 3 flock cameras, costing Rio Rancho thousands of dollars in damage. They say the cameras with the sign saying "You're welcome, Republic of New Mexico." Martinez showed up to court today, but he refused to identify himself during the proceedings. The judge considered that as a failing to appear in court, but Martinez claims he exercised his right to remain silent.
No, I can't. You call me, but I am here. I'm right here. I stood up. I walked up there. She wanted my name, but I have a right to not bear testimony against myself. Giving my name consults as testimony. And so I just chose to remain silent.
Good for him. That guy knows exactly what he's doing. So does the judge. She's going to pull every trick in the book against him. So he shows up and she says, give me your name and say who you are. And he goes, well, I'll be testifying against myself if I say anything. And he's got witnesses that know that he was there at court, but she's coming after him for failure to appear. Yeah, that's reminds me of M.M. Bundy when all this mask stuff was happening. And they wanted to pull him into court for not wearing a mask. And they told him that, to go into court, you got to put on a mask. I'm not putting on a mask, rather. So they got him for failure to appear. But he was there at the court and they wouldn't let him in. And he had witnesses about that as well. Regardless of how that works out, I really do appreciate the people who have the courage to fight this. And again, his name was Levon or Javon. I'm not sure what his first name was, but last name Martinez. Good for that guy. He is a hero. Meanwhile, Americans are raging about autonomous police drones that are swarming the skies. Isn't it interesting? They call these these cameras that they put on poles, they call them a flock. What do you call a group, swarm of drones if that's not a flock? We got to come up with a name for that, I guess. You get all these different crazy things about a group of different animals. You get a murder of ravens if you get a whole bunch of them together. But we need to come up with some name for these spy drones. People are pushing back on it, saying, well, we need to have more relational work on the ground, not remote drones in the air. You're going to have a chair force of cops who are going to be surveilling people. There's a hot new phrase that's bouncing around police departments across the United States: drones as first responders. From small town Indiana to New York City, cops are embracing autonomous surveillance drones as the latest innovation in policing. And again, if we don't stop this, stop it soon, it just keeps getting worse. It keeps metastasizing. That's why I say when you look at the only places where they push back against this, whether it's LA or Portland or San Francisco or Oakland, they're all doing it because they think that the flock cameras are targeting a particular group of people. Well, they will be targeting a particular group of people. It'll be people who don't agree with the government, whether that is on their war policy or whether it's on some domestic policy or whether it is something like wearing a mask and taking a vaccine. We have seen how that works, and I don't understand for the life of me how the people are sitting still for this. It's not like this is we're not projecting something and theorizing about this. We experienced it 6 years ago. Do you want to give these people more power to do that kind of stuff to you than they had 6 years ago? They said, gathering intelligence on peaceful protests, surveilling minority communities. Again, only care if it's surveilling minority communities. What if it surveils everybody? Do you want equality and slavery? Is that what you really are holding out for? And intimidating activists. Well, Trump didn't like the reporting that was done by the New York Times, so he sent police to the doorstep of the journalists to intimidate them. He has absolutely no respect for free speech in any way, shape, or form. Don't criticize him. Don't criticize Israel, or we'll do our best to destroy your life. We'll put you in jail. And by the way, they look at this and say, well, right now you're surveilling minority communities. You just wait. They will flip the script, just like they did in the UK. So they will flip the script, and then they'll start coming after anybody who opposes their immigration policy, for example, like they do in the UK, that two-tier policing that we're seeing there, how prejudicial it is against the people who have always lived in Britain, the native Britons. It is a system there that absolutely despises the native Britons and is set up to repress them. In Minneapolis, residents are speaking out against the city's police department plan to partner with a company called Skydio. Almost like Skynet, isn't it? A private defense contractor that primarily manufactures drones for the military forces. But now they've got a new profit center. They're going to have the militarized police. So, yeah, it's another one of these things. They're always looking for a new profit center, aren't they? The deployment of autonomous surveillance drones rests on the presumption that regular people unto themselves are existential threats, said one person who was protesting this. He said, but if you accept and normalize the idea that every single person could be an existential threat, then you've already stripped your own residents of their freedom and their dignity, haven't you? Wait a minute, isn't that what TSA is really about? Isn't that the operating principle of TSA? That every single person is a threat until they prove you innocent, you're guilty. You are a terrorist at the airport until they put their hands on you, until they scan your body. Minneapolis appears to be the main battleground right now for anti-police drone sentiment at the moment. Similar concerns have been raised in Syracuse, Detroit, and Las Vegas. One resident observed that every innovation in police technology is ripe for abuse. That's right. Power will always be abused because of human nature. And that's why we need to have these checks on that power. Instead, they're going to just keep writing checks. Every technology given to state and federal law enforcement has been abused. There's absolutely no question about that. We're going to take a very short break, folks, and we'll be right back. I want to play for you the clip that I was talking to Gerald Slinty about. And it was some people on one of the cable investment channels that were talking about how out of whack and how dangerous the current stock market is at the moment. We'll be right back.
Using free speech to free minds. It's the David Knight Show.
Welcome back. We just had the worst day on record for IBM stock. Dropped 25% on Tuesday after they released their second quarter results. It is the worst day on record for IBM. As a matter of fact, it was even worse than what happened with the previous record that they had. Happened on October 19th, 1987, when we had the big stock market crash. And so a lot of people are talking about the index as well by one individual, Schiller, who put together a metric that looks at the price to earnings ratio of a lot of different stocks. And that number was in the 30s, just as the 1929 bubble crashed. It's typically 17, but it was in the 30s during the 1929 crash. It's now in the 40s, that price to earnings ratio. So I think it is highly overpriced. And these people also believe that as well.
I'm not bearish on AI per se. I'm sure we're all going to use it. Many of us are using it already. The question is, what's the ROI on the AI? Mm-hmm. It starts out, the way these bubbles all start, there's a kernel of truth that captures the imagination of the individual, whether it's the South Sea bubble, or it's Dutch tulip bulbs, or it's .com, which I've lived through. Yep. And it starts out as a good idea, but what happens is the price changes immeasurably. And the best definition, I've actually heard of a bubble. There are many definitions. The best one I've heard is something that changes human behavior, that people do things that they wouldn't do otherwise, whether it's because of FOMO, fear of missing out, or otherwise. And I think that's kind of where we are with AI. I mean, I'm happy to change my mind, but show me the money. Where's the ROI? And I don't see it. I don't see it coming either.
Doesn't seem to be deterring capital from flowing to that business. We've seen extraordinary amounts of equity raised. Now we're seeing tech companies that never even thought about the bond market raising tens of billions of dollars in the investment grade bond market. We've got a Korean company listing its ADRs today here in the U.S. I mean, I've been on global Wall Street for 30 years. I've never seen this amount of money flow. Again,
I want to elaborate on the sheer magnitude of this. Julian Garrett of Macro Strategy Partners in the UK, erudite economist, I've known many years, has made a calculation that this bubble, this malinvestment is 17 times what we saw in the era of .com. And what's allied to that, what's really important is the sums involved are so much larger relative to the real economy. The fallout from this could really be much more significant.
George Noble with us, of course, Definitive Infidelity with Mr. Lynch.
Yeah, that's the magnitude of the issue that we're looking at. And when he talks about a bubble being defined as something that changes human behavior, Here's a good example of this. You look at the SpaceX initial public offering that he had, and how it shot up, and now, the rockets go up, the rockets come down. Anyway, despite being valued at almost $2 trillion, SpaceX lost nearly $5 billion last year. And yet, look at its valuation. Now, it's starting to come back down to earth. Nevertheless, when we look at this, it's also faced with some of the same reality issues in terms of competition with China. China is just able to launch and land a rocket on a barge. Of course, they're several years behind them, but they're rapidly closing the gap. And it's not just China, it's Japan as well. So will they cover their enormous losses and start actually making some money? That's the same issue with all the .com things as well. As we look at this, there's a massive pushback against the AI data centers. But remember, folks, as bad as the local issues are, as bad as the cost of electricity, the pollution issues, the water usage, and all the rest of this stuff, the noise and light pollution, the worst thing about it happens, you don't have to even be next door to it. It's not really a not in my backyard issue. Yeah, definitely you don't want it in your backyard. But this is something that's going to affect everybody where it's built. Now, in New York, they've become the first state to ban AI data centers because now they're looking at this as a concentration of wealth, but it really is a concentration of political power and surveillance. Once they realize that, you can better believe that the Democrats will jump on board with both feet on this, and they will be cheering that left and right. It's kind of interesting when we look at Marsha Blackburn, who has been at the center of pushing digital ID, digital currencies, the data centers, stopping local government from doing it. She was just on being interviewed because she's now running for governor here in Tennessee. She was just on a local station, and they were talking to her, and she said about a massive amount of money that she was favoring in terms of giving $30 million to some business that was going to build. And it doesn't really matter what it is. I mean, I've opposed this. When you look at these sports stadiums, they give these billionaires hundreds of millions of dollars to build stadiums. And they always defend it the same way Marsha Blackburn defended this issue. They always say, well, it's going to bring in a lot of money. One thing she said was, we're going to make that back in payroll taxes. And it's like, sorry, you were just bragging about the fact that we got rid of the income tax here in Tennessee, and you took credit for helping that happen. Well, if you don't have an income tax, you're not going to make it back in employee taxes. And so she doesn't even keep her lies consistent. But even if that were true, even if they were going to get revenue back, how do you justify taking money from one business over here and giving it to another? That is not capitalism. That's not a free market. That's just corruption. And that is exactly what is happening with a lot of these tech companies as well. There was an interesting clip, and I will play it for you here. This is Sam Neill, who just recently passed away, the actor. And he had something to say about America that really kind of hit as to where, well, actually, we don't have enough time to play it, so I'll play it for you tomorrow. But it was basically Sam Neill saying, I was working in America, and he said, we were shooting this film. He said, it's not a happy place. And the guy that's interviewing him in New Zealand said, really? Why not? And he goes, well, all these people, he said, they used to have businesses on Main Street and all these different things. He said, all of those things are shut down. Everything has been consolidated into a few large companies, and at the time he was talking about it, he said into malls. And that is really what is happening. The lifeblood of our country, they used to talk about the strength of the UK versus Napoleon's socialist France was the fact that it was a nation of shopkeepers. He thought that was an insult to them. But it was actually their strength. When you take away people's stake, when you say only the stakeholders of the World Economic Forum are going to own anything, the rest of you will own nothing, guess what? We're not going to be happy. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. but each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.